the Talk Station is proud to present The War Files. The War Files, a selection of interviews honoring our warriors of the greatest generation, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam.
Your name is?
Bill Bass.
And where are you from, Mr. Bass?
I'm from Cape Carteret.
And how long have you been living in Carteret County?
Probably about 18 years.
Mr. Bass, tell us a little something about your background. You were in World War II?
Yeah, I was in World War II. I was a tail gunner on a flying fortress. I flew 35 missions over Germany. I had one bailout. I had to bail out one time. We got shot up bad. Also had a crash landing. We had one of the wheels, the tires was blown out, and we had a forced landing, but we were able to, every one of us came out okay. And after the war, I was a skeet instructor. I was shooting skeet, which I really enjoyed doing.
Where are you from originally?
Originally from Durham, North Carolina.
And how did you get into was it the Army Air Corps at the time?
Army Air Corps. At the time that I went in, they drafted me into the Air Force. I didn't volunteer for the Air Force, but they were picking all little men. I was 145 pounds soaking wet, and they were picking all of them because, see, on a flying fortress and on a B-24 airplane, the tail that I flew, you just couldn't hardly get in there. I had two 50 cal machine guns in there. I had my parachute. I had flak suits. What I used to do is to find out the planes that had been shot up bad, and we had these flak suits that you put over your chest and over your back, and real thick with metal. And I would take them, the planes that wasn't going to fly the next day, and I'd get those flak suits and line up on the side, both sides, and then on the bottom. And I'm sure that it must have saved my life a time or two because of anti-aircraft fire. We had a rough time. What was so bad about it is when we would go into Germany, we had P-38s, P-47s, and Spitfires as our escort. Well, they could only go in so far because of the gas. They run out of gas, the Germans had it all figured out. They would wait for us to know we had to run out of gas, be halfway into Germany, and that we'd have to turn around and come back. Well, that's when they could jump us. So they came out with the P-51, and that P-51 was a summer airplane. And they could go in with us, or stay with us, and come out with us. They put a belly tanks underneath them, mm-hmm. And they would go in there with us and come out with us.
When did you go into the Air Force?
I went into the Air Force in April of '44.
Where did you train?
Trained in Muroc Army Air Base, Laredo, Texas, and Keesler Field, Mississippi.
After your training, did you immediately go overseas?
As soon as I got through with my overseas training, yeah, we would go fly, and because we would all fly on the plane, but we didn't have any guns or anything. Mm-hmm. We would just practice, but we never did have to do anything. We just get our time in flying before we went overseas. But we went overseas. We had a pretty rough time once you got over there.
Where were you stationed in England?
Oh, I was stationed in a place called Ipswich, England. And when I bailed out of that plane,
the one that you originally,
I landed in a tree right almost in the middle of a town, and all the other boys had already got out and got down. And I was hanging up in that tree. And they wanted, they said, come on down. I said, no. I said, I'm up there and I ain't hurt. I said, I'm gonna wait and let somebody get me out of here. So they got their fire truck and came up there with a fire truck and shot the ladder up to me. I crawled down the ladder and never hit the ground.
When did you go into the Air Force?
I went into the Air Force in April of '44.
How many crew on a B-24?
There's 10 men on it. Pilot, the co-pilot, the bombardier, the navigator, the radio operator, a waist gunner, left waist gunner, right waist gunner, tail gunner, which I flew, and the belly gunner. Well, now the worst place of all is the belly. I mean, that's as far as my place and the belly are the two of the worst places. Because now when we had a crash landing, the belly gunner fractured his ankle. So we had to put somebody else in there. And I was the smallest, so my pilot asked me, he said, Bill, how about you flying the belly? So I said, okay. So I flew the belly. But I'm telling you right now, you're balled up in a knot, and you got behind you, you've got two clips, and you got with a metal thing behind you. And when you start over the target, I mean, if you had to get out of there, you pull those two hooks, and it comes, this whole back end falls out, and you fall out backwards. That's the only way you can get out of the darn thing. So I flew it one time, and I told my pilot, I said, look, get somebody else. I don't like that. Another thing that a lot of people didn't know about, we had a plane that a lot of times would fly out beside of us. Mm-hmm. And when it fly out beside of us, you'd see it out there, but you didn't want to shoot at it. But we found out that the Germans would take those planes after they had been shot up real bad. They would take those planes and fix them up and fly with us and fly out next to us. Would fly out. You couldn't shoot them because you said this might be one of your boys. So you just had to take a chance of that. But the worst thing that ever happened to me is we were on a mission. You fly 12, 12, and 12. In other words, it's squadrons. Mm-hmm. You have a squadron of 12 planes, another 12 planes underneath it.
So behind and below it.
But they had a staggered so that the gunners, when they would shoot, they couldn't hit anybody else. It was so they staggered so they couldn't hit them. But when we went over this target, and it was an A group, B group, and C group. Well, we were down in the C group. Well, my pilot called back and he said, Bill, he said that new crew, so they had a new crew. First time he'd flown, he'd fly out by himself. He wouldn't fly with us. He'd fly because he might run into each other, they get scared. So this plane, my pilot called up and he said, on the intercom, he said, y'all watch out, said up in A group, said that new bug plane is right over top of that other plane. Said surely they'll move over or something before they drop the bombs. Well, see, they have one person that drops the bombs. About those 12 would be the lead crew. He's the one dropped the bomb. So it was right. So about that time he dropped the bombs, and when he dropped them, it blew up about 4 or 5 ships. Just as blood. And we were way back down in C group, and the concussion from that thing, you couldn't hardly hold it. Even my pilot, he knew we had a lot of planes with it running into each other. See, those boys wasn't but 19 years old. Some of them flying an airplane, 18, 19 years old. And that's the reason we had they just didn't have a training.
Where were most of your flights? Into Germany, but where into Germany?
The worst target we had was a place at oil fields in Germany. And I went there 5 times. 5 times, and it was the worst target. It was worse than Berlin. It was a flak and anti-aircraft. That's what it was.
How often did you fly in a week?
We flew every day. Sometimes it would be 8, 10, 12 hours. I mean, it was. You see, we'd have to go deep into Germany. That near the last, we had to go way down deep into Germany. And see, you had to get up and form. Takes time to form, get ready.
It got cold in that airplane, did it not?
That's what I was thinking. It gets to about 50 below zero. 50 below zero. Well, now we had suits with wires in them. It was all aiming into the boots. Of course, once we got in the air, we all went to our positions. A lot of the times, the Germans were coming in on us when we were landing, not particularly my plane, but some of them, and they would come in and strafe you after we landed. So we had to they told us, especially you tail gunners, stay in the plane until we get it landing, because there's a chance of the Germans coming in. So we had to keep my .250 calibers ready in case I needed them.
If you're in the air for 7 hours, obviously you have to get food, drink.
They gave us a Hershey candy bar, I believe it was, and a pack of chewing gum, and I think that's about all. But I kind of got in good with one of the Red Cross girls. Mm-hmm. When we would land, we'd have to go back to briefing to tell what we saw and everything. The girl that I knew, she served whiskey. They had whiskey, and they would give us all a shot of whiskey after we got the mission. They would give us a shot, and then we'd go to briefing and tell what we saw. If we saw in the drunk trucks or anything we could have seen. But she always, what I do, you get in line and get a shot, and I'd put my name down, Bill Bass. Well, then I'd go back and get back in line again and put in a John Doe or John Smith or something. She'd look at me and laugh, but she's the one that said she knew. And that way I get about half loaded for it, then I go home and go to bed, go to sleep.
All right, so you flew every day. I'm looking at your hat.
Uh-huh.
You have a hat that says B-17.
Uh-huh.
Did you fly a B-17 as well?
I flew 24/7 missions, and then changed over and flew the rest of them B-17.
Tell me the difference between the B-24 and the B-17.
This B-24, it was a heavier airplane, and it was faster, but it wouldn't go as high and wouldn't take as much punishment. Now that B-17, you could shoot it and tear it all to pieces, and that thing would come back in. The B-24 has got a little turret type thing you sit in, and with your guns. But now on this B-17, I had a 250 caliber machine gun like this, and I was on my knees, sitting on my knees. That's what I rode the whole time, from 8 hours on my knees with my guns.
You've served from when to when?
Well, I landed in Scotland on D-Day. And as soon as we started flying, that's when we started going deep into Germany.
Mm-hmm. So you flew 7 missions in the B-24, and then how many missions in the B-17? Do you remember?
Well, it was 35 in all, so I believe.
Okay. So did you finish out the war in England, or did you come back?
Yeah. No, I finished out my missions. Then I turned around and came back to the States.
We've heard stories about the pilots and the fact that you had to fly 35 missions. What was it like as you got closer to the end?
Scared to death. Scared to death. Yeah, because we had a lot of boys, I'm sure, that probably on that last mission got it. But it's just, you can't imagine. Now, I rode the tail. Some of them says, you don't like that tail. So that's a rough place. Well, it was rough. But I said one thing about it. When we hit the anti-aircraft fire, when I see that anti-aircraft smoke come up all around me, I knew that we'd already gone through that. But when I was when you're up in the tail, the nose, and you look up and you see that stuff and you think you got to go through it. But see, what I see, I've already gone through, which makes it a whole lot better.
Are you going to be traveling on the honor flight?
Yeah, I'm going.
The same question I've asked everyone. What is it about World War II veterans that when they came home, they didn't do much?
But they don't talk about it, did they?
No, apparently not.
That's what I don't understand. I've told her a lot of times. I went for years and years and years and never even mentioned anything about what I did, and all of a sudden it's like now people see me now with that hat. Mm-hmm. And when they see me with that hat on, they'll stop and shake hands with me. Now, I have that happen all the time. One time we were in Las Vegas, and I was getting ready to get on the plane, and this guy was in charge of the line and everything. He motioned for me to come up to the front, come up there, and told my wife, and she said, come on. So took me up in front, and gave me a seat, a first class seat, and he says the captain says I want to give you this, and he gave me a seat up there, and my son-in-law was with me. He said, I know why he did it. He said he saw that hat you got to hit on that World War II. It's B-17 World War II. So
it's got B-17 World War II Flying Fortress and then the tail gunner.
Yeah.
The airplanes had names.
Yeah.
What was the name of your B-24?
Lucy, this was on a 24. This was a plane. It wasn't a brand new plane we got. And it already had his name was Lucy, L-U-C-Y, Equipment, Q-U-I-P-E-M-N-T. And it was a girl with a bra about halfway off. That's where they got equipment. That's somebody else's name.
What was the name of the B-17? The flying.
Same thing. Yeah.
Really was?
Yeah. Well, see, it had the 24s first, and then when we changed over to 17s, we just kept the same name. Yeah.
I want to go back to the World War II monument and the memories. Did you meet anybody that you grew up with while you were in England? Did you run into any people from Durham? Anyone from Durham?
I don't believe I did. I don't think I did.
Well, going back to that question I asked you about the fact that so many people came back, they put their uniforms aside.
Yeah, that's right.
What was it about that experience what were your memories like? Did you have any memories, or were you trying to forget, or what was it?
It didn't bother me. I don't know why, but it never did bother me. And like I say, once in a while you might see somebody start talking about the war, but as far as somebody saying, what did you do and how many missions you fly, they never did do it, but now they do it now. I think this war now that we're having now has got a lot to do with it.
When did you leave the Air Force?
August of 45, I believe.
And then what did you do?
I was working for a wholesale grocery, selling wholesale products, you know.
Why did you move to Carteret County?
After I left wholesale grocery, I went to work with Lance, peanut butter crackers and peanuts.
Right.
I stayed with them for 32 years. Well, then when I retired, we already had a place down there, and so we decided that we just gonna, not having both places, we just moved down here. So we moved down here after I retired. So, and she retired. She was working. She's retired.
And your wife's name is? Eleanor. This is great, Mr. Bass. I really appreciate that. It's a great story.
I'm glad to do it.
You've been listening to The War Files, a selection of interviews honoring our warriors of the greatest generation, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. The War Files is a TalkStation presentation.